Ali Akbar's mother Layla has a message for Ali Akbar. When I lost you, Ali, my tears, they fell like rain. A mother's hurt is like no other type of pain. I've lost you and soon I'll lose your father, Hussein. I've lost you and soon I'll lose your father, Hussein. Oh Ali, my heart's in pieces, now you're no more. No mother has felt what I felt, seen what I've saw. Alone greeting your fate, I saw you on death's door. The cries when you fell in my mind, I can't ignore. I lost one and Abbas's mother lost all four. Oh Ali, I'm still waiting to come back, you swore. 1,000 words could never describe all my pain. 1,000 words could never describe all my pain. To your sister Ali, tell me how I explain. You were with me seconds ago, and now you're slain. I've lost you and soon I'll lose your father, Hussein. All the prayers in the world won't bring you back, I've tried. All the tears won't return you, I know, as I've cried. My heart stopped beating, Ali, when you died, I died. You were my only son, all my joy and my pride. My back's broken, Ali, you are my only guide. Now you've left me, Ali, from my pain I can't hide. Oh Ali, did Muhammad pour you some water? Did you quench your thirst or drink the blood of slaughter? You brought me just like Zainab as Abbas brought her. I've lost you and soon I'll lose your father, Hussein. This day, Ali, I never thought of you as group.
This day, Ali, I never thought of as you grew. The moment you left me, my heart was split in two. 4 pieces of your body, the sand I searched through. With your blood, the grief of my heart, Karbala drew. Oh, Ali, now you're gone. Who will Hussein look to? Oh, Ali, now you're gone. Who will Hussein? Ali, now you're gone. Who will Hussein look to? When the spears rain on him, Ali, what will he do? I call your name, Ali, but I hear no reply. I call your name, Ali, Ali, Ali. I call your name, Ali, but I hear no reply. I raise my hands for you and look towards the sky. Alone you've left your father. Can you hear his cry? I've lost you and soon I'll lose your father, Hussein.
Many thanks to the poet Haydar Al-Qazzaz.
أعظم الله أجرنا وأجركم من مصابنا أبي عبد الله الحسين. Dearest viewers, we welcome you to another night of mourning, another night of sorrow, another night of grief, another night of lamenting together as the lovers of Ali Muhammad. And as we begin to reach these last days, or the day of Ashura, as we begin to go through these last nights, the heart gets tougher, or it gets softer and softer as we hear tougher and tougher masa'ib. As we start to hear the calamities recently of Ali Akbar alayhi salam, of Al-Qasim alayhi salam, and now we start to lament the one who resembled the Prophet, the one who, when Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam would yearn for the Prophet's scent, they would go to Ali Akbar. For his sound and voice, they would go to Ali Akbar. And it's a reminder for Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam of that perfect man, and equally for us, a reminder for how tough it was for them. And equally for how tough this was for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. At such a challenging moment after what he had seen with his companions, to have the conviction and ability to say to his son to go, showed the strength of Hussein's trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan, and that he didn't want to be in any situation but that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordained to him. So tonight we remember this youthful, valiant warrior and scholar and pious man in Ali Akbar. Well, Ali, thank you for that. And I must just ask, the part of the recitation, and I'm assuming this comes a bit improvised, or certainly probably not in the poem, but something that you had in the recitation, which was when he said the mother calls his name Ali, and you repeat that line over and over again. That emphasis that brings is special, really special.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum, dear viewers. I think it's just, it's that cry knowing that there's not going to be a reply.
Yeah.
And so is it a loud scream when you just hear of the news, or when you just see Ali Akbar, or is it she's more calling out in the night?
Yeah.
And I think that the type of poetry that was used, I think, and that stage of the recitation, it wasn't. I didn't want to reflect a horrific scream in the sense, Ali, where are you? It's more like she's realized everything that's happened and she's acknowledged it, and it's more of a cry of Ali, I'm lamenting you and I'm eulogizing your absence, in a sense. And that's in terms of the poetry.
It's beautiful though, I think, as you mentioned, the emotions that they went through and how they would express that grief at different moments, either in anticipation of, in this case, her son going out, or during, and I'm sure you mentioned on the Messiah, where she looks at Abu Abdullah to see how Ali Akbar is doing on the battleground, to when she starts her dua, to when he returns and then goes out again. You know, each of these moments through to, as you said, when they then maybe start walking towards Kufa and Sham, and like the difference in how they would call out for their beloved ones. It's
not only that, it's the 17 or 18 days that they left Medina to reach Karbala, and all that dread and anticipation, knowing something horrific is going to happen. You know, all of that. I mean, it plays must have a heavy toll on the person's mental strength, mental illness, mental well-being.
Absolutely.
But then you're right, so there's so many different emotions that they go through. The anticipation, the actual death, after that, Sham, Kufa, only God knows what went through their hearts. And actually, what was quite interesting about Ali Akbar, alayhi salam, there's a couple of things actually. Not only, I think with the age of 27, we may see it as youths, because in this day and age, maybe 27 is quite youthful. But in those days, he's definitely a well-groomed man in that sense. As you mentioned, a scholar. And there's two things that I wanted to point out as quite interesting. Number one, in terms of how we mention he is the best representation of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his great-grandfather. His great-grandfather. His great-grandfather, and essentially in both akhlaq, so his personality, his character, in the way he spoke, so literally the tone of his voice, and also his looks as well, his looks. And I think there was a story that one of the a Christian man actually came to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He said, I saw the Prophet, and I saw your Prophet Muhammad, and I saw Jesus, the Prophet Jesus, in a dream. So Imam Hussein turns to him and says, how do you know this was Prophet Muhammad? He goes, I can 100%, it's just the feeling that I got, this is the Prophet. So he said, if I was to show you someone, would you recognize that person as the Prophet? He says, yes, I could. So Imam Hussein then calls for Ali Akbar alayhi salam. And at the time when Ali Akbar walked in, he was covered, because he was so beautiful, sometimes he had to cover himself. And so when he uncovered the face, the man said, that's the Prophet. That's exactly who I saw. SubhanAllah. That's number one. Number two, his lineage is very, very interesting.
Yes.
Because from his mother's side, well, we know his father's side is Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Imam Ali alayhi salam, Fatima Zahra, and so on and so forth. But his mother's side, I only found out quite recently actually, his mother's uncle is Muawiyah. And therefore she's first cousins with Yazid. That's one. And I think there's another link as well that brings her to Umar bin Sa'ad as well.
Interesting.
Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas.
Interesting.
Because she was also her grandfather, whose cousin was. In any case, two of the cursed members of the enemies, both Yazid and Umar bin Sa'ad, were actually cousins with Layla. And that's why there was a letter that was sent to Ali Akbar alayhi salam saying,
you've got an option almost.
You've got an option here. And similar to Abu Fadl Abbas, he scoffed at the invitation and threw it away. And of course decided it wasn't even a decision. It was just, I'm going to throw this away.
It's almost like the audacity of the enemies to try and share that. You know, a man who's been groomed in that household, they're not going to have an unwavering fault about them.
And I'm not sure what they were trying to achieve by that as well. What was the actual goal? I mean, you were actually going to think that Ali Akbar was going to switch sides and fight his father. It's impossible. So, I think we're at the stage where we are, my kind of favourite time of the show, to be honest with you, in terms of the Ziyat Ashura. We continue.
Inshallah, we do, and it's been a blessing to learn about this with you and with the viewers for sure. And yesterday we went on to the Bara'atu ilallah part, which is followed by another lengthy sequence of la'an upon certain people and also their families or their, the al of Ziyad, etc., etc. I'm not going to go into that because, and it's really fascinating actually, going through the book, there's probably 30, 40 pages just on the history of those people that I specifically mentioned and why they're mentioned, just from a historical perspective, which, I highly recommend the viewers to have a read through. So we won't go through that, but it was quite fascinating as I was reading through it to see, wow, similar to kind of the connections that you're sharing now, the different connections that they had. There's a lot of emphasis around illegitimate births within this lineage as well from the enemies, etc. And that's a big thing back then, of course, as well. The kind of adab or lack of that a lot of those individuals had. So it's a very interesting read, but we're going to move on to a part of the ziyarah that I think everyone knows, Bi'abi anta wa ummi. And I know there's poems made about this. There's lecturers will give series on this. It's something that we're taught from very young, and it's something that we see repeated in a few of the ziyarat as well. So we'll look at Bi'abi anta wa ummi and laqad azuma musabi bik. And we won't have time for the rest of it, so we'll just start with this. The first thing to say is that, so quick translation just for that first part, may my father and mother be sacrificed for you, the very famous line. People may find this surprising, so I'm going to be careful as I present this, but the book, and Shaykh al-Fan actually mentions from his gathering of the tafsir that it's not meant literally. And when I read that, I was like, oh, okay. I honestly was like, my whole life I was thinking, that's the perception, right? And I'm sure there can be a literal sense to it, but he says, look, fundamentally, if someone doesn't have a father, does that mean they can't read this line anymore?
Okay.
So there's got to be, there is more to it, fundamentally. So once we kind of get over that, it's really just this very poetic way, in a way, of expressing absolute, and we've used this word many times, conviction and yaqeen in the Imam. In basically saying that at this point, I'm giving everything to the Imam. And one of the most dearest things that you can have to yourself is your parents. And put aside my parents, this man and this lineage is first. Absolute priority. Like, this doesn't even matter to me if I could, put it as crassly as that. And obviously I'm careful with that because we recognize the rights of our parents, etc. But it's a very profound statement to be able to say, even them, take them. Don't care. Really don't care. You are my priority. And I give you, Imam, absolute preference over anything in this world. Money, time, fame, wealth, family, presence, blood. It's yours. You take it. I have nothing, right? You are what I give it to. And it's also a very practical thing for us to realize as well, in that we may be faced with the moment of, for example, those most dear to us making a decision or asking us to be part of a decision that goes against the teachings of Ali Muhammad. And even at that point, even if it's my best friend or my parents, I have to pick with the right side. I have to pick with the truth. And we see in Ziyarah Jama a beautiful line, Al-haqqu ma'akum wa fikum wa minkum wa ilaykum. We say that to Ali Muhammad, that truth is united with you, within yourselves, comes from you and returns to you. So how can I pick anything but you? It's a very, very weighty statement. Hence, we recognize that now this is a prioritization in our life. It's a recalibration if we've slightly gone wrong to say Imam first, and therefore if Imam first, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first, and the faith first before anything. So that's just that part on Bi'abi anta wa ummi. Then we go to laqad azuma musabi bik. Indeed, my affliction due to what happened to you is immense. And I just, before we go into the initial grammatical part of it, this is quite, and this isn't mentioned in the tafsir, it's something that I just reflect on as I read it. I was thinking, we're going to the Imam. Well, let me put the anecdote there to the side and come up with something else. If someone in the community's passed away, let's say a friend's father, right? And we've all been there. Friend's father's passed away. And you go to the Fatiha Majlis, or you go to the burial, and you see your friend for the first time. the adab in which you address them, you're so careful, you know. You probably practice those words, especially if they're a dear friend and you know they were close with their father. You're very careful how you approach them, even how you shake their hand, if or how you hug them to make sure, you know, they're not too intimidated. If you bring them something, you check if they need water, you practice these consoling words. You're very measured in every moment. And here, we're now addressing the Imam about how we feel about what he's been through. And again, I've mentioned this before, that I rush through this so quickly, but I'm looking to the Imam and I'm about to say, look, I've just read through what's happened to you, I've learned what's happened to you, etc. And what I want to say to you is, لَقَدْ عَظَمُ مُصَابِبِكَ, that indeed my affliction, my pain, what I've experienced having heard all of this due to what happened to you, and now I'm about to describe it, is immense. That should make us tremble. We're speaking to the Imam directly about the loss of his son Ali Akbar, about the loss of his brother Abu Fadhil, etc., etc., etc. It's a big moment in the ziyarah. So, in terms of that's just kind of like a bit of a reflection, if you like. But in terms of the grammar, again, we see this lam come back in, which we said in a few nights ago. This is an oath. It's a very weighty way to say this, that I'm almost pledging an oath and swearing by the following statement, that what's happened to you has really affected me as your believer. It's really caused me anguish to hear about this. And year on year, as we learn more and more about the Masa'ib, as we learn more and more about the Imam and we grow our spirituality, we need to see and assess ourselves, almost treat it as a timestamp every Muharram, because we can remember what happens each Muharram. It's an easy thing to reflect on, right? We know what happened in 2019, 2018, whether it's a random month and a random year, we can't really remember. So we should use this as a timestamp to go, you know what? Has my yaqeen and ma'rifah of my Imam increased? And has my anguish as to what I feel about this tragedy increased? Because if it stayed the same, and even if you were to say, look, I've learned everything I need to learn, look, they're attached to the divine is infinite.
Wow.
They're on their way.
Yeah.
You're going to learn more and more and more. So if we're not taking a step up each year, or each week, or each time we recite it every day, inshallah, is it having an effect on us? Or as much of an effect as it should do? Because having this proper knowledge and accurate understanding about the personality of the Imam, and accurate understanding as to what happened on the day, and also this true love and intense love that we should have with him, needs to be on the increase. And I'll share an anecdote that Shaykh Al-Fan mentions. He cites Ayatollah Shaykh Abdul Karim Al-Ha'iri, who was the founder of, it says the Hawza in Qom, but I would assume one of the Hawza in Qom, but I'm not sure.
Yes, yeah.
And it said that when he would sit in a majlis and just the name of Hussein, the utterance of the name of Hussein, would bring about a flow of tears such that he would sometimes be overcome by loss of strength. Because he just has that association, that ma'rifah, that the moment that name is mentioned, he just connects. He's in a different level, you know. He's studied and studied and studied and truly and sincerely wept for this man and understood his tragedy, now that just the name brings about that sorrow. And that's how we react to a loved one when we remember that they've passed away. And if we've just said that the Imam takes precedence over our parents, we should be grieving way more for him than we do for our parents or that loved one that we think about. And I just want to finally mention, and this was really profound, which was this grief that we've now just described. Is it just a physical grief that we feel, or is there more behind it? Because we see, and I've been mentioning many of the ahadith from Kamil al-Ziyarah over these nights, which some would say seem very excessive or quite out there or a bit much. But look, it's a book compiled by a scholar that many of us very much trust, and we won't go into his beautiful history, but it's a book that we trust greatly. And sometimes when we don't make the link as to the tragedy on the status of the Imam and therefore what happened to him and what an Imam serves, it's easy to then say some of these hadith seem a bit excessive, right? So we need to recognize, now that we know the divine status of this man, and now that we weep for him out of pure sincerity, the effect that can actually have, more than just the physical effect of crying. And I'll mention a couple of a hadith. First, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, the breath of one who is grief-stricken for us and is sorrowful due to oppression on us, it's tasbih, and his anguish for our situation is worship. You may be thinking, how does crying for Imam Hussein alayhi salam count as tasbih, count as worship? And we understand tasbih to mean someone who is passing swiftly in the worship of Allah. It depicts a journey towards that. How does that take me towards Allah? And it's similar to what we've mentioned in the past nights. We're addressing him as Aba Abdullah. We're addressing him in association with his Lord. So anything that he feels in terms of that sadness is going to be sadness equally that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would feel if we, again, revisit the past night's discussion. It's a direct connection to our Lord. So if we mourn for him, we're mourning for the tragedy that he faced. We mourn for the tragedy that the Ummah lost, the divine leader. We're mourning the attack on a faith. We're mourning the attack on Quran and Ahlul Bayt. We're mourning an attack on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It counts as this worship that we have.
Absolutely.
And Imam Sadiq alayhi salam also comes forward and says, and this is beautiful, لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ ثَوَابٌ إِلَّا الدَّمْعَةَ فِينَا. For everything there is a reward, save a tear for us. Such is the status of the tear.
Wow.
And finally, he brings forward a work, Shaykh al-Faham brings forward a work from one of the Mufassirin, where he talks about the spiritual link of the tear. So the spiritual nature of a physical thing, which is the tear. What is really behind that? Because we hear these hadith that, even if the size of the tear is smaller than that of the wing of a fly or a gnat, it still has such great barakah. So he tries to explain what this link is. So he says that if a tear that we shed for him should signify a harmony between our soul and his spirit, it represents a brief flight that our spirit makes along with Hussein's spirit. Because now we're in tune for a moment when that tear comes out. And this is incredible. When that tear begins to fall, your heart's entered a moment of sincerity. That you're grieving for a man that is divine, therefore you're grieving for your Lord as well. It could illustrate a little glow of his valor, a particle of his free nature, a particle of his faith, a particle of his piety, a small spark of his tawheed. Such a tear has infinite value. Wow. And this is the tear that we shed for Aba Abdullah, and why that can be intercession for us on the Day of Judgment, inshallah. So just a brief few reflections on this beautiful line. لَقَدْ عَظَمَ مُصَابِي بِكْ, inshallah.
MashaAllah. Thank you so much for that, Hajj Sadiq. Inshallah, our last session tomorrow.
Inshallah.
Yeah, definitely, inshallah. With that, viewers, just a quick reminder for anyone who wants to send in their poetry, please do so. We're happy to read them out live. The details are on social media, specifically Twitter. They're using the hashtag #VersesOfLove. Please do send in your poetry. We'll be reading them hopefully, if any of them come through.
Inshallah, inshallah. And with that, we move to our dear guest reciter for this evening, who will take us through the tragedies of Karbala, and we welcome the words and voice of Brother Sajid Ali Dina with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
It couldn't have been a better introduction for me. In terms of the first poem I've chosen, and we didn't plan this, but alhamdulillah it's worked out perfectly, because the first poem is a response to people who might not understand the rituals of Muharram, and I'm going to respond to them by comparing it to something that we all understand, which is the salah, the daily salat. They ask me, what is Muharram? I tell them it's a vision. They say, what are you wearing? I tell them my ammunition. They ask why I'm sad. To understand their sadness is my ambition. They say, why aren't you laughing? I say, from the world, this is my partition. They ask about the black clothes. I tell them, is there any prohibition? They say, why do you cry? I tell them, you won't understand. It's only through his permission. They say, why is the mood serious? I tell them, this was Hussein's condition. And they say, who is Hussein? They say, who is Hussein? I tell them, I pity from him your division. They say, why the hype? I say, this is our religion. They ask, why the emphasis? I tell them, we have a mission. They say, but isn't it a bit excessive? In our mourning, there's no exaggeration. They ask about the man sitting higher than the rest. His honor is that he recites a martyr's lamentation. They ask about the lights and why they're switched off. The response is simple. We're using our heart's vision. What about the tune when he narrates the tragedy? Isn't it like the melody during a du'a's recitation? They complain about the wails that we make when crying, just like Sukaina's cries were stopped by the opposition. They ask about the chests that are red and bruised and question our traditions with a subtle objection. They question the hand as it hits the chest and ask, what's the need for this kind of action? Look no further than Habib. When came to him the salam of Zainab the patient, what was his reaction? How red do you think his face turned? Do you think it was normal, his expression? What about Abis? How bruised was his chest when he'd claim insanity and rip off his protection? Do you remember Burayr when he stood in front of Hussein, a chest full of arrows? Yet this is innovation. They ask about the chants when we say Ya Hussein. Even with the most beautiful names, they have a problem. They ask about the chants when we say Ya Hussein. Even with the most beautiful names, they have a problem. Ya Zainab, Ya Abbas. Why don't you just call Allah? My dear brother, you haven't understood intercession. They say, but isn't salat the best of deeds? And the reply, what a beautiful question. When you twist open the tap and collect water in your hands, don't you remember Abbas at Furat and his decision when you wash your hands with cold and clear water? Don't you recall Sajjad's tears when water he'd be given? When you splash it on your face and wipe down as you've been told, Hussein wiping blood on his face. Don't you envision when you wash your right hand followed by your left? When you wash your right arm followed by your left, a flag bearer's severed arms should encompass your attention, and wiping your head should remind you of his when the pole that was struck on it was mentioned. With excess water on your palms, you bow to your feet, and even to tie a shoelace, Qasim was forbidden. You stand for qiyam, still and upright, just like stood beside him every companion. You stand for qiyam, you stand still and upright, just like stood beside him every companion. Then you go into ruku', offering your neck to God. You're just another soldier in Hussein's battalion. Doesn't your forehead on the floor remind you of them all? For the sand that covered their face, may I be ransomed. So to answer your question, could there be a sign more clear? Even in salat's best act, even in prostration, your head must touch the dust that soaked up his spilled blood. Your head must touch the dust that soaked up his spilled blood. What's better, this or that? There's no comparison. If you neglect prayer, you're not a Husseini. But if you leave Hussein, you have no religion. The best of deeds is the one done solely for Allah. The best of deeds is the one done solely for Allah. It's salat if it becomes for a believer an ascension. It's saving a life when you find someone in danger. And it's mourning Hussein with a pure intention. This may all raise eyebrows and invite suspicion. They may ask, what is your goal? I'll reply with an admission. My goal isn't to convert you, nor is it to attain heaven. I don't aim to make people happy. Making friends is not my intention. I'll keep crying and I'll keep mourning, and I don't desire your affection. I'll let you keep calling me insane. Matters not to me your decision. And if you keep saying I'm wrong, from you I'll form a division. And I don't care who you are. If you mess with this emotion, for Hussein will always come first, and all others require his intercession. And that's my goal and my aim, so that when he enters heaven, I'm not separated from him once again like I am in this transition. Oh Hussein, I don't deserve it. Oh Hussein, I don't deserve it. But don't deny me your recognition. Sallu ala Muhammad.
Allah, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa alihi. Ahsantum. Wow.
Ahsant, Hajj, ahsant. Barakallahu bikum. A man comes to Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, and he finds him weeping. Brothers and sisters, just a quick note before I carry on. Essentially, we've only heard of Karbala, yet our hearts and our tears flow. We've just heard the story. We haven't seen it with our own eyes.
only hearing the story of something that happened 1,300 years ago can bring us such emotions that we start to cry and lament for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Imam al-Sajjad didn't just hear it when he sat next to Sayyidah Zainab in the tent, and Sayyidah Zainab says, I can hear bones crunching. And he said, that's the bones of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. It's not just, I just heard it, he's seen it with his own eyes. Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam. So when the man comes to him and says, Ya ibn Rasulillah, it's okay, take it easy on yourself. He says, what are you talking about? Yaqub lost one son and he was alive. Yusuf, he was alive, and Yaqub lost one son, and Yaqub lost his eyesight for this because of his love for him. But I witnessed and I saw the killing of 18 of my family members. Faces so bright like the moon were killed right in front of my eyes. Yaqub cried and cried for his son, alayhi salam, Yusuf alayhi salam, even though he knew he was alive. But I say, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Then what state were you when you saw your son Ali Akbar getting killed right in front of your eyes? Allah, when the companions were all killed, and Imam al-Hussein started crying and lamenting and saying, هل من ناصر ينصرنا هل من معين يعيننا هل من طالب للجنة يطلبنا هل من ذاب يدب عن حرم رسول الله. Is there anyone to support us? Is there anyone to help us? Is there anyone who is seeking Jannah who would come and join us? Is there anyone who would stand to defend the women and children of Rasulullah? At that point, he finds a beautiful, young, shining moon coming out of the tent, and his heart sunk Imam al-Hussein, for he knew this was the moment that he was dreading, because he couldn't hesitate. Of all of the Hawashim, of all of the members of Bani Hashim, every single family member he rejected first and foremost, other than Ali Akbar alayhi salam. When Ali Akbar came to him, Ali Akbar, he said, my father, give me permission to go into battle. He didn't say no. He said, his son, he said, oh Allah, oh Allah, bear witness, a man who most resembled Rasulullah in his looks, in his features, in his character, in his manners, in the way he spoke, came to Abu Abdullah. Imam al-Hussein says, Allahumma ishhad ala ha'ula'i al-qawm innahum دعونا لينصرنا ثم عدوا علينا يقتلوننا وقد برز إليهم الآن أشبه الناس خلقا وخلقا ومنطقا بنبيك. Oh Allah, bear witness that those enemies of yours, they invited us to support us, then they turned against us and started killing us. And now a man who most resembled your messenger in his looks, in his character, in his speech, is about to go and fight them. Ya Allah, punish them, Ya Allah. Ali Akbar then realizes that this is the permission from his father. So Ali Akbar then rides his horse, just like his grandfather Imam Ali. He comes to the battlefield. He was about 27 or 28 days on the day of Ashura, a young man, youthful man, powerful man. So powerful that when he came into the battlefield,
for anyone who denied, for anyone who even guessed or started to question who this man was, he says, أنا علي ibn al-Hussein ibn Ali, نحن وبيت الله أولى بالنبي والله لا يحكم فينا ابن الدعي أضربكم بالسيف حتى يصطلي ضرب غلام هاشمي علوي. I am the son, I am Ali, the son of Hussein, the son of Ali. I am from the Prophet's family. I will fight against you bravely. The enemies of Allah will not be ruling over us. And indeed, he comes out fighting bravely like a lion. He kills many of the enemies. They disperse away from him. A soldier who was known for his bravery and fighting skills comes to Ali Akbar, fights with him, and Ali Akbar finishes him. When they see this, every single member of the enemy all dispersed, all ran away. So then there was a call from Umar bin Sa'ad. He said, attack him from far, attack him from far. And so at that moment, the arrows and the spears rained at Ali Akbar. Ali Akbar just managed to escape and come back to Imam al-Hussein. But in what state? He looks to Imam al-Hussein and he says, my father Hussein, it is hard time carrying all this metal on me. I am thirsty, oh father. Aba al-Atash. Imam al-Hussein looked at him. He said, son, be patient. It's only a few moments from now and you will be quenched by your grandfather Rasulullah. And some here would say that why would Ali Akbar ask Imam al-Hussein an impossible request? There was no water to be gained. There was no water for Ali Akbar. Why would he put Imam al-Hussein in such a position? Actually, it's the reverse. For Ali Akbar knows that it's difficult for Imam al-Hussein to allow him to go into battle, to see him die, see his only son die. So he was having mercy on Imam al-Hussein. How? Because Imam al-Hussein, knowing that the death of Ali Akbar will quench his thirst. So it'll be less of a blow to Imam al-Hussein, but it was still difficult. Ya Nas, ya oh people, oh brothers and sisters. His father says, be patient, it's only a matter of minutes. He heads into the battlefield once again. But he tells him, before you go back, go into the tent. Your mother, she's waiting for you. He goes inside the tent. The women, his sisters, his aunts, they all gather around him. They say, Ali, 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 don't leave, don't go. We don't want to see you covered in your blood. He tells them, I have to make you all proud of me. In front of my grandmother Fatima Zahra, he then goes back into battle. What's interesting is that Layla alayhi salam comes out of the tent. She looks at Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, pleading, tell me, what is happening to my son? Is he safe? Is he doing well? Imam al-Hussein, at times when Ali Akbar is doing well, he would smile. But at times when he knows there's danger on Ali Akbar, he would frown. At this moment, Imam al-Hussein, looking worried, tells her to go into the camp and pray for him. And that's when Layla goes inside the tent. She raises her hands in dua. Ya Radi يوسف على يعقوب أردد علي ولدي. Oh Allah, you brought Yusuf back to Yaqub. Bring my son Ali back to me one last time. Allah answers the call of his mother. Ali comes back to the camps one last time. He walks into the camp. His mother has closed her eyes, her hands up in dua. He then stands in front of Layla. And then she opens her eyes, sees Ali Akbar in front of her. She says, my son Ali, oh my son, you are about to leave one last time. Yes, mother, I will make you proud. And she allows him to go into the battlefield. Ajarakumullah, he goes back into the battlefield. He starts to fight once again like a lion until the enemies of Allah surrounded him from all sides. There was no route back to Imam al-Hussein anymore. This was the final moments for Ali Akbar. The sky became dark around Ali Akbar. Why? From all of the arrows and the spears being thrown at him. His body was filled with arrows. They reach his chest, they reach his back. another enemy of Allah comes and strikes him with a sword over his head. Aywa Aliya. He fell on his horse's head. Very important here. He fell on his horse's head. The blood gushing from his head falls onto the eyes of the horse. Ajarakumullah, blinding the horse. So instead of returning to the camp of Imam Hussein, he takes him to the camp of Umar bin Sa'ad. Allah, Allah. That's when the enemies pounce on Ali Akbar, striking them with his swords, stabbing him with spears. They had no mercy on Ali Akbar until the horse then returns back to the camp of Imam Hussein, or close to the camp. At that point, Ali Akbar, from all the wounds, from all the gushes, he falls from the horse saying, Aba ya Hussein, alayka minni salam. Oh Father Imam Hussein, my salam unto you. I see my grandfather Rasulullah. Allah, Allah. Imam Hussein rushes to Ali Akbar, puts his cheek on his cheek, looks towards the sky, but then he looks at Ali Akbar's face. Ali Akbar's face is smiling and then frowning, smiling and then frowning. Imam Hussein's last words to Ali Akbar is, my son, why are you smiling? He says, I smile because Rasulullah is giving me a cup of water which is quenching my thirst. Oh Ali, why do you frown? I see my mother Zaghra. She is slapping her head saying, Wa Husseina, Wa Husseina. She is telling me that my son Hussein will join me soon. One last mention of Ali Akbar alayhi salam after all of the bodies were strewn on the lands of Karbala. And Umar bin Sa'ad came, the La'in came, and he ordered the horses to trample on the bodies of the companions and the family members and Imam al-Hussein and Abu Fadhil al-Abbas. He ordered them all as they came to approach Ali Akbar. The family, the tribe of Ali Akbar said, no, he is from us. You will not trample over his body. So they go to another person. This person is from the tribe of Asadi. You can't trample on his body. This person is from the tribe of Kalb. You can't. Al-Kilabi, you can't trample on his body. This tribe is from Bani Riyah. You can't trample on his body. Umar bin Sa'ad says, give me a body that has no tribe, that is attributed to no tribe. They pointed to Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. And that's when the hooves trampled over the body, and only the body of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein.
إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون.
Abbas and Hussein watched their sister. Abbas and Hussein watched their sister. The children of Zainab are thirsty, and with their dry tongues to Hussein they come. Together will destroy this army. A proud Zainab, Hussein broken, and Abbas's hands embrace all three. A proud Zainab, Hussein broken, Abbas's hands embrace all three, and in armor of their grandfather they ride into the battlefield, young boys against the strongest men, men reminded of Ali then, and Zainab's calls are not for her sons, but for her mother's son Hussein. How many sons die on Ashura? A baby wrapped in Hussein's arms. A baby wrapped in Hussein's arms, no army left, and left unfed. How did Hussein carry him out and walk along the path he'd bled? Cries ringing in his voice, he cried, O father, and his son he lifted. Ali al-Asghar was exposed, glistened the sunlight on his forehead. He saw the arrow and said a prayer, and fluttered his hands in the dry air. Was there another moment as painful for the son Hussein? How many sons die on Ashura? A parched tongue he sees in a dry mouth. And in checking his own, Hussein weeps. With no tears and no voice he weeps. Blood from the heart of Akbar seeps. And this desert land of heartache becomes a land of mountains steep. How is Hussein to return back carrying his son on a spear? The mother of one Ali falls as the mother of Hussein calls, someone take from him this body and protect my son Hussein. How many sons die on Ashura? The sweetness of Qasim's words ring. The sweetness of Qasim's words ring, and the heart of Hussein they sting. I can offer you no water, but the reply, I want nothing. I can hear death surrounding me, and I can see my father calling. I see your mother and her tears, and awaiting Abbas his wings. So death for me, sweeter than honey, to meet my father and to meet Ali, and collects the trampled pieces of Qasim, the son Hussein. How many sons die on Ashura, resting on a bed of roses? No one comes near or opposes. Anyone who dares to approach, Hussein a winner discloses. A knife one man wants to brandish, to murder the son he poses. A raised hand, how many hearts break? Wails hard from Noah and Moses. The father of Yusuf is torn. He searches for his son's shirt, torn as the thorns begin to cut the body of the son Hussein. How many sons die on Ashura? Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.